Hey guys, welcome to Electronic Dance Money, your number one business resource for making money as electronic musicians and producers. Yo, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Electronic Dance Money. I'm your host, Christian Casito. I hope you guys are doing well today. We're going to be jumping into another episode, hanging out, talking about some stuff. And today we're going to be talking a little more about what I see has been going on in the music industry, specifically for electronic music. But I mean, this is probably true across the board about the music industry, that I think there should, in my opinion, be a serious change. And this all has to do with ego and kind of why ego is holding every single person back. And specifically, really specifically, these smaller amateur producers or DJs that are really trying to make a name for themselves. We're going to be talking about, like I said, specifically about ego and why it's holding you back. You know, why the egos of people within your local scene is not just holding you back, but also holding those people back as well. And I first want to kind of talk about why I had the idea for this episode, and kind of the backstory behind it. And I was hanging out with a buddy of mine, and we were kind of talking some business stuff and talking about the local scene that we're in and how political it is. And this is the thing with just about every single electronic music scene in any city, it's fairly political. There are the big head honchos that kind of run the show. But specifically here, there's some head honchos that are there's a few major companies that kind of run everything here. And they do a really good job of boxing anyone out that tries to start throwing shows and start throwing good shows. And it's really unfortunate. And so we got to talking about why is that a thing? You know, what's the root cause of it? And really I boiled it down to, when I was talking to him, it seems like people don't want to handle the competition of other people potentially coming in and what they would consider, quote unquote, stealing business. And a lot of this has to do with fear mindset and a victim mindset of scarcity. You know, they're afraid that if their product's not good enough, then, and you know, deep down inside, they may even think that their product's not good enough. And this is what we're talking about here, is like throwing shows. And someone could come in and clean that up and make a better show. So it's like, okay, well, if you're afraid that someone could come in and possibly do that, then that means you're not putting your best foot forward to make sure that you're throwing the best of the best shows. And a lot of that comes from deep-seated ego too. You know, people who think that they are the best and no one can come in and you know, shake the foundation of that. But ultimately what most scenes need are people to come in that can, you know, shake that foundation and create more opportunities for more people. So when we were discussing this stuff, I was thinking, you know, this might be a good episode to talk about. And it got me thinking about how much egos are really running the show in terms of all of the music industry within electronic music. For most people, like, it's not necessarily the person themselves that are doing a lot of the actions or making the decisions that they're making. Usually it's all based on their ego. Their ego is the thing that is calling the shots and deciding what they're going to do. You know, is this going to affect my ego in a negative or a positive way? And if it's potentially even remotely on the negative side, they're going to cut that down and go with the positive route. You know, how does this make me look? Does this make me look better than everyone else? If so, then we're going to go with that. And a lot of that has to do with control and power that people want. Yeah, this is business, and that's kind of how it goes, but it affects so much more than just one person. And we're going to be talking about that and how egos are really just destroying most of the scene and smaller producers that are trying to come up specifically. So let's talk a little bit about what the ego is and what it does. And I just mentioned, the ego in the scene right now is calling the shots for a lot of people. And that's what the ego is. It's the I in referencing like yourself and your decision making. How am I going to benefit from this? A lot of that is rooted in ego. And when you're growing, and especially when you're a musician specifically, if you're growing and becoming bigger and bigger and getting more and more fans that adore you, with that growth comes this inflated ego that you are better than most people. You're the king sitting on the throne and no one can dethrone you. And that causes a lot of destruction, not just for, like I was saying, the single person, but a lot of people around them, friends, family, and I mean, even stretching further than that. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm not going to name names because I don't think it is my job to be kind of pointing fingers or anything, but there was a huge artist here in town in Austin. And a couple of these guys I think they were direct support or opening, I can't remember. And they were killing it. I mean, throwing down at this show. The crowd was into it. They were amassing more people. And it was sick. And they got booted off of the stage by these artists. The headliners, they came out to them and kicked them off. And why? Let's break this down. Why did they do that? Well, if they're throwing down and putting on a killer show, what's that telling the headliner? That means, you need to work harder. You need to put a better show on now because everyone liked us. Now you need to work hard. And really what it's doing is those guys are just making them accountable. Are you going to put on a good show? Because this is as good, like you have to put on this good of a show or better. And their egos wouldn't let that happen. Their egos didn't want these guys to come off just as good or better than these big artists. Because then who are they? If they're these quote unquote nobodies that are playing just as killer of a show as them, then who are they as huge, massive artists? So these egos can really get in the way and inflate and destroy something good. It hurts these younger artists. They get kicked off the stage. And it also hurts the fans that are there because they were enjoying the show. Now you're taking away from their entertainment and what they paid for. When you buy a ticket, you're not buying a ticket just for the headliner. In some cases you are. Most of the time, headliners are selling tickets, but people are going there for a show. And when they go to a show, they do expect like an opener, a support slot, and then a headliner. That's why people show up for the openers. Like they know there's a continuous show that's going to be like 4 or 5 hours long. So that the price for that ticket, that $25, $30, $40 is a lot of it's for the headliner, but it's also because people are coming to see the other artists as well. So you're now affecting the money that people paid for to come see you, and you're hurting the artists, you're hurting your fans, and ultimately you're trying to protect your ego. That's really all you're doing. So you can see how this ego can really play a massive effect in terms of like how far it stretches. It's not just the person or the other party directly involved in this. It's a lot of whoever is there at the moment is affected by how your ego makes decisions. You see the same thing with like politicians all the time. Politicians are never to blame for anything, though they're the ones usually making decisions. They never take blame for any bad decisions they may make. It's always put on someone or something else, some other third party, or some magical thing in the air. It's never a politician that is at fault for a bad decision. This is because of massively inflated egos, and you see this especially with musicians. And here's the thing: It's not just musicians though, it's bookers and venue owners and promoters. These are all people who have like just incredibly inflated. You also see this with some bookers and some promoters and some venue owners. Like you'll see these inflated egos that end up holding the entire scene back as a whole. So that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on talking about today. And so let's get into that. Let's talk about why ego is holding everyone back. So I gave you that example of a big artist booting off a smaller artist and how that affects not just those two parties, but a third party. It's a lose-lose-lose scenario here, okay? Most of the people who are throwing shows are the ones that are trying to control something. You know, they're trying to maintain control of what they built and what they have. And so they're so focused on maintaining that control instead of what is the best benefit for everyone in terms of the people who are buying tickets, the artists that are actually practicing and showing up and playing shows, and the headliners. And we've talked about this before about creating win-win-win situations and scenarios. A win-win-win is the best thing possible because every party involved in that win-win-win is going to talk highly of you. They're going to keep coming back and they're going to want to keep working with you. And if that's the case, then you're going to thrive so much more. Rather than, you know, creating either just a win-win scenario where the third party is lost, because most of the stuff we're talking about here, almost always in the music industry, there's a third, you know, there's three parties involved. There's you, the person you're making a decision with, or for, and then there's usually another party that's affected by that. In this case, they're usually fans that's like the actual third party that is affected by whatever decisions are made. You know, think of a festival that, actually, here's a good example. When I was at Paradiso years and years ago, I think this was like 2014, 2015. Actually, no, I think it was 2016. They had to shut down the festival. They didn't open up the festival day one until like 5 or 6 p.m. and it was supposed to open up at 3. Because the winds were too strong out at the gorge, and so there was a safety concern. So the people running the show had to make a decision. They had to shut down the show, and who does that affect? Well, one, it affects the people playing the shows. It affects the actual staff themselves, and it affects the people who are trying to get in, the fans who bought tickets. Okay, so those are three parties that were involved in that decision, and this is affected in so many other ways, like we were just talking about. A headliner throwing someone off the show. That affects the headliner themselves and their own personal ego. It affects the people they're throwing off the show, and it also affects the fans. Think about a record label signing on an artist. It affects the record label as a whole. It affects the artist they're signing, and it affects the people who listen to that artist and the record label. There's almost always three parties involved. So we want to try to make win-win-win scenarios as much as possible. When we stop focusing on the win-win-win is usually when the ego is playing, is being tied into there somehow. You know, it's affecting your decision making, and you're just focusing on you. And when we talk about this control stuff instead of helping out other artists, then you're cutting off massive opportunities to create and build people. Not only that, but it's affecting you as a business owner to actually grow as a person and as a business. So when you start seeing these big promotion companies or booking companies in your local town that like are the head honchos, and and if you get more involved in your scene, you'll hear about the politics that are involved, about people outbidding other people for artists to come into town. Specific promoters and bookers like have a stronghold on the best venues so that you just can't throw a show anywhere. Like this happens constantly. Instead, what would be best is being able to help throw shows for those big players, or even just letting them throw a show and being like, hey, just throw our logo on or something. You can keep all the sales, all that, just promote our business itself. You know, that's mostly if there's contracts with those venues. But there's so many other ways you can go around by creating win-win-win scenarios where you can help out smaller artists, you can help out smaller production companies. And ultimately, what it comes down to, even when we're talking about egos and holding back smaller artists, this is affecting smaller artists. When big companies are boxing out other smaller production companies that are trying to come up and throw shows, those smaller companies can't afford massive artists yet. And so they're going to turn to the local scene and the smaller guys to come play shows. Now, when they get boxed out and they can't play shows, or they have an opportunity to bring in a big artist and they can't do that because a bigger production company is outbidding them or whatever is the case, then this is a major issue, because now they are trying to put a lot of money on the line to bring this bigger artist in. They're going to probably bring in smaller talent as well, local talent. And now you don't have an opportunity to play with a big artist, or just, be able to play in front of a bigger crowd than what you usually play in front of, because these bigger production companies don't want other people to be successful, because that's a direct threat to them. It's a direct threat to their business and their ego. And it destroys and holds everyone back. And this is the kind of change that I'm talking about that I think really needs to happen. And it's not, like I said, it's not just with these promoters like I'm talking about, but it's also with artists in general, bigger artists. So as you start coming back, it's important to make sure you're checking your ego, make sure you stay humble. And we're going to get more into that in just a minute. But going back to what I'm talking about in terms of bottlenecking others, it's going to do you more harm than good. You're not giving yourself the opportunity to be opened up to new business ideas and business decisions. And ultimately, I'm talking to those of you that are going to want to eventually start a production company or be a promoter or whatever. Because I'll tell you right now, the people who are throwing those shows, who are promoters or production companies, whatever, bookers, they're not going to listen to this episode. They probably don't listen to these sorts of things because, again, most of the time, your ego holds you back from wanting to learn more or possibly explore new business avenues and make new business decisions, because you think you know it all, you've done it all, you've got it all. It's only up from here. So for those of you small guys that are wanting to come up and, start production companies and start promoting, this episode's for you to check your ego. This is also for those producers that are coming up and you want to be a big full-time producer and DJ and tour. Check the fucking ego at the door, man. There's so many other people out there that have been in your shoes, that have been affected by the same things that you've been affected by, and have struggled the same way that you have struggled. And I guarantee you there's 100 other people that are going through the same struggles that you already went through. And it's important to remember that. And you never know who's going through the same shit as you. And this is mostly what I'm talking about here, is being involved in trying to start a music career. So you got to check that fucking ego and know that, look, there's 100 other fucking people out there like you. They're all trying to work and they're all trying to make it. And you got to check that ego and not let it get ahead of you. Otherwise, you're going to just ultimately hold yourself back and everyone else. And this is just one way of actually stopping your ego from being able to consume everything that you do and all the decisions you make. And there's some additional things that we're going to talk about now in terms of being able to check that ego and make sure that you don't get an inflated ego and you have this superiority complex, because that's a major issue in our scene. And I'm sure there's many of you that have seen it before. This is a major issue with smaller local guys too. For some reason, they think they run the local scene and they're all that in the local scene. And a lot of those guys, you never actually see them move up to a bigger stage. I know all of you have seen these people in your local scene. I've seen many of them in multiple local scenes. They are big players in the local scene and have been for a decade, yet they have not gone anywhere else. They haven't blown up regionally. They haven't blown up in a different state. They haven't blown up in a different country. They're not doing shit but trying to be the king of the local scene. And for some, they want to do that. They don't mind, but most of those people would like to go up. They want to move up, clearly. Otherwise, why else would they be doing this? Having great friends is one of the best things that can really help check your ego. They should be checking your ego for you. I have great friends who check my ego all the time, and I like to check other people's ego as well. So it's important to make sure you don't surround yourself with yes men that just tell you yes, yes, yes. They tell you nothing but you're amazing, you're great, this is awesome. They should be telling you that's not that good, or this could be better, or just telling you to shut up when you need to shut up. You know, making fun of you and teasing you for having a big ego is one of the best things that can make sure you stay humble. And this is what we were talking about earlier is, staying humble. Like I was saying, there's 100 other people that are going through the same shit as you and have gone through the same shit as you and are currently going through the same shit that you've already been through. So stay humble and understand that us as producers and DJs, we all go through the same motions. That big headliner was once an opener, and they once first opened up a DAW and learned a DAW and learned how to write a melody and learned sound design. Like, we've all gone through those steps. We've all experienced those same steps, and we're all going to experience those same steps. So we're not that different. And lastly, one of the best things that I can suggest looking into is stoicism. Stoicism is a really great, it's a great applicator to make sure you stay humble and your ego is getting checked. And one of the best modern Stoics currently to research and look into is Ryan Holiday. He does a lot of writing on stoicism and ego. Specifically, his book, Ego is the Enemy, is one book that I strongly suggest that I'll put in the show notes. It's a really fantastic book. He breaks down egos of past figures in history and talks about other historical figures and how they maintained not having an ego and staying humble. And there's some incredible figures in this book that he talks about in terms of ego. And it's just such a great read. It's one that I'll occasionally flip back to and just read different stories, because a lot of it is just, it's a book constructed of different stories of historical figures and their egos. So that is one of the best books I can recommend to you. Look into Stoicism and look into Ryan Holiday. And that's pretty much it for today's episode, guys. This is a topic I wanted to really jump into to talk about. And, we all need to check our fucking ego and know that we're not all that. None of us are the shit. Most people barely know us. Most people barely know the biggest headliners in the industry, except for a select few. But, you look at people like Kashmir. If you go to a random person on the street and ask if they like Kashmir, they're going to think you're talking about the material Kashmir. They're not going to think that you're talking about the EDM producer and DJ Kashmir. So most people don't know the biggest names in the industry. Most people are never going to know your name, and make sure that humbles you. That's it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you stay humble. Check out the show notes at enviousaudio.com/episode 58, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care.